Re-Zero, Arc 9, Chapter 1, O Prayers, Be as Clouds.
The final hours were calm, and had passed surprisingly quietly. O star of mine. Indeed, the tone of that voice was flat, yet the degree of love contained within its call overflowed, so as Yorna, as Iris, looked up at the man beside her, her long eyelashes trembled. Nothing about that voice was out of the ordinary, it was something that felt as though it had called out to her hundreds, nay, thousands of times during this miraculous tryst, and yet, in this moment, it felt special. No, to be precise, if just this moment were to be excluded, then any other of those calls would also be special. However, the specialness of this moment differed to that of all those that came before. After all, it was a call that signified the terminus of this miraculous period. Yorna, yes, Your Excellency. Gazing back into the eyes looking into hers, she returned from her own lips a calling filled with love. Her voice trembled not, and she praised herself for not letting her feminine feelings make her collapse. In the moment of their previous parting, Iris/Yorna had been unable to leave him with any words. But, whenever she reincarnated and looked back at that time, she had thought countless times about what she would do if given another chance. If given another chance, she would absolutely not leave behind the wailings of a weak woman. Ugod, 'tis the inverse of that time. Mine self shall be passing on before thee. Yorna, that is so. To call it a revenge of sorts, well, I'm sure Your Excellency has come to know of the malice present in this world of men. Ugod, verily. Much I have learned. Nay, it was taught to me. By the many who walked alongside mineself, of whom thou wert the first. Yorna, as those almond-shaped eyes narrowed, he Ugod Volikia, reminisced on those olden days, on the people who were present therein, and the gentle wavering of his eyes' splendor caused Yorna to feel a piercing sensation through her chest. Always, he had been the type of person to wear a stern expression except for when he was in front of Iris. Because he was such a person, Iris had wondered if he had been able to even once relax his cheeks or eyebrows after she had passed away. And now after this, after he went towards that place between the skies and the lands, would he, Ugod, be not afraid, O star of mine? Mine life hath been an unexpectedly blessed one. Yorna, Ugod, I met thee, and received life. I walked with thee, and received blessings. I parted from thee, and in doing so committed a grave error, but now that fate hath brought us together once more, I received the opportunity to rectify it. Ugod's words, the lovely voice of a person counting their blessings one by one, gently dissolved the anxiety and fears within Iris/Yorna's heart, lovingly unraveling them. Since antiquity, since he had lost his dearest Iris, Ugod burned with rage, and in his hatred left behind a mistaken law that became the trigger for countless tragedies. Ugod's descendant, the current Volikian emperor who was extolled as the wise emperor, had promised to abolish that law, to lift the curse which bound the wolf people and mole people. Such was the dearest wish of Iris/Yorna, and Ugod's final regret when he had been alive. Finally, he would be able to return this world to those who had the right to live in this era. To that end, Ugod, O star of mine, thou art included amongst those. Suddenly, as he took her into his arms, Ugod's words caused Iris/Yorna's breath to stop. It felt as if the emotions inside of her had been properly dissected, more precisely than ever before. Yorna, Your Excellency. Ugod, even were it bestowed upon thee in a form undesired, I imagine that no matter the epoch thou hadst found thyself in, thou wouldst have spent thy days forming bonds in earnest. Of course, even in thy present form, the same doth apply. That is something thou ought to fulfill to the utmost. Towards Iris/Yorna, she who was lost as to what to do with the unnatural existence known as herself, those words gently addressed a choice to move towards a way of being that was easy to understand. No matter the time, Ugod was always correct. That was neither because Ugod was wise, nor because he was strong. It was because he thought sincerely about those that he faced, with reverence, because he was a compassionate emperor who wished for the happiness of others. Known as the King of Thorns, and feared more than any other, Iris's beloved emperor earnestly thought about, honored, and wished for Yorna with unbearably deep love. And so, as far as Iris and Yorna were concerned, Ugod's words would always be correct. Thus, the fact that the truth in his words would also hold true for people other than Iris/Yorna meant that, Yorna, I have no choice but to spend the remainder of my life proving that. You good, 'tis a great service. Hearing Iris/Yorna's determined answer, Yugid responded with a smile. At Yugid's taciturn way of being, Iris/Yorna narrowed her eyes slightly, and extended her arm so that she could touch his cheek, as she brought her lips close to his. Yorna, lips met each other and overlapped, as those who had both died in that era, a man and a woman who by all rights should never have been able to reunite, separated by entire worlds, were now the closest they had ever been. Yugid, like that, the closest contact that they had ever made in this world persisted for a bit, and then a bit more, and a little while longer, before the distance between them slowly grew. The eyes of Iris/Yorna locked with Yugid's, and then, Yugid, O star of mine, I love thee so. Yorna, as do I, your excellency. Evermore, without fading for all perpetuity, my heart shall long for you. Having exchanged a kiss, having delivered each other words brimming with love, his final moments were of his lips curling into the shape of a smile. For the olden tale known as Iris and the King of Thorns, a story that began in the age of antiquity, a story that had kept postponing its own conclusion until the present day, this was the true curtain's close. Dawn broke upon the first night since the great disaster that had shaken the entity of the Wallachian Empire had come to a conclusion. The threat of undead wreaking havoc across the empire had been averted by means of the unity of imperial subjects, devoting themselves to the law of iron and blood. At the forefront of those sword wolves of Wallachia was the majestic figure of their apex, Vincent Wallachia, who exchanged blows directly against the enemy ringleader with Yang's sword raised aloft. Centered around the imperial capital of Lupagana, the damages had reached every major city of Wallachia, such as the fortified city of Garkla, Glarasia, the city of Iron and Blood, the demon city of Chaos Flame, and the Cloud Sea city of Mazoria. Yet, each and every city had been able to avoid falling into a catastrophic state. Therefore, whilst left with major scars, a triumphant momentum was what ultimately enveloped the Wallachian Empire. Of course, thinking in the long term, the top brass could not bask in the victory forever. Those leading figures would have to deal with the damage reports flooding in from various locations one after another, as well as the numerous circumstances of their subjects that they would need to sanction, and thus they would not have any time to sleep. Amidst those reports, there was a piece of information that had been silently snuck in. In the battle against the great disaster, having contributed greatly to the victory of the Wallachian Empire, the obituary of a lone woman who had lived like a flame and captivated many, within a room of the fortified city of Garkla, which was serving as temporary headquarters in place of the ravaged imperial capital. Emperor Vincent Wallachia happened to catch wind of that obituary, creating a silence very unlike himself, who would respond to all matters within an instant of deliberation, and after spending some time with his head down. Vincent, I see. Those brief words were all that he spoke. The fight against the great disaster had ended, and people began to move on to reclaim their lives. Wallachia suffered terrible devastation from the undead army during the unprecedented great disaster, but the inhabitants of the realm resolutely held their heads high, standing back up one by one as they set out to rebuild the land. The sight of the people of the empire simply overwhelmed Petra Late. Petra, although I don't really like the empire much. Having said that, with mixed feelings, Petra stood in the streets of fortified city. A significant part of Petra's reason for not liking the empire was anger that this was the place where her precious friend and Petra's love interest, Natsuki Subaru, was forcibly taken away to. But even disregarding those factors, Petra's feeling for Wallachia still leans toward dislike, but regardless, they cooperated and made an immense effort to prevent the country's destruction. Petra was also relieved that the great disaster had been overcome and the empire was spared from destruction. However, even so, Petra, who in public addressed him with the honorific Summer, was concerned for the man who had doubtlessly done more for the empire than anyone else, even the emperor. Petra was extremely worried about how much it must have worn his heart down in an empire full of terrible things because Subaru was such a kind and compassionate person. Even so, the final nail in the coffin was too much for Subaru, who had so many things to worry about. Petra, Priscilla Bariel Summer, that was the name of the woman who had caused a tremendous, deep, and painful wound in Subaru's heart. Due to Petra's position, she never exchanged a single word with her. However, there were opportunities. Before the great disaster, she was on the same side of the battle for the imperial capital and had ample opportunity to talk with her. However, Petra did not dare to approach Priscilla. This was because she, like Emilia, was a candidate for the royal selection in the kingdom of Lagunica, and she felt that she should not get more comfortable than necessary with their opponents. And Petra regretted that, by not having interacted with Priscilla, Petra had no right to mourn her Priscilla Bariel's death, and, therefore, found it difficult to sympathize with Subaru and Emilia. It would be hard to tell two very heartbroken people that she understood what they were going through. This was something tremendously frustrating for Petra right now. Hello, Miss Petra, are you alone? Petra, oh, Zika-san. Petra, who had been pursing her lips and tensing her cheeks, looked up at the call, and there was Zika Osman with a round, voluptuous hairdo. As a general of the empire, Zika played an important role in the battle against the great disaster, and he was a very likable person who treated Petra as just another person without being arrogant about his position. Because of his diligence, Zika would likely be heavily relied upon after the war, but it was unusual for him to be alone in a place like this. At this, Petra's eyes widened. Zika, I finished reorganizing all the troops, so I have finally come down to check the damage myself. I had heard the reports, but I had to see it firsthand. Petra, I see, that was it. I do not know the details of the reorganization. But well done, Zika, thank you for your thoughtfulness. However, the role I was able to play is insignificant compared to those who are working so energetically, such as First Class General Goes and First Class General Kafma. Petra, I don't think that you can say that your hard work is not important because one of you worked harder than the other. Zika, looking embarrassed, became even more so from Petra's statement. On the other hand, Petra reflected on her own remarks, remembering that when she had worried about Subaru earlier, she had compared his efforts to those of another stern-eyed emperor. She wanted to see things the same way as the people she liked, but she was frustrated with herself for not being able to. Petra, but it is difficult for those of the general first class, isn't it? Not even a few days have passed since then, and you have to fly around to other cities. Zika, yes. The generals of the various regions are responding, but the influence of a general first class directly in front of them cannot be ignored. Both in terms of the morale of the troops and the control over them. Petra, I understand that the soldiers will be happy to see the people they admire, but control means. Zika, sadly, even in these situations. No, precisely because of this poor situation that many are willing to take advantage of it to achieve immediate gain or to fulfill their ambitions. Petra, Zika lowered his eyebrows, and Petra's round eyes went downcast in response. Petra was actually convinced by Zika's reply, thinking to herself, I knew as much. The Wallachian Empire chose to stand together against a great enemy. Still, once the great disaster had been eliminated, the problem reverted from the perspective of the nation to the perspective of the individual. They take what they lack, steal it, and, in some cases, try to force their way through it all. Those general first class Zika mentioned intended to serve as a deterrent to such problems. Zika, general first class, goes left as soon as his wife at imperial capital was confirmed to be safe, and general first class Kafma also left as soon as he received his promotion. Petra, that was great, right? Everyone was so surprised. Zika, there are only 9 slots for general first class in the empire, and the recent war has left several of those slots vacant. The creation of a new general first class is one of the few good things to come out of all this. Kafma understood that and accepted the position of general first class, even though he'd previously turned it down. Petra, Zika-san, you've never had that sort of talk raised to you, right? Zika, for me? Petra tilted her head and asked Zika, who praised the names of the general first class and their way of doing things. Petra did not observe the battle up close, so she did not know how those of the general first class performed. However, Zika's fighting spirit was also quite impressive in the sense that Petra was able to witness it up close and personal. During the battle for the fortified city, There were those who were in the command post, observing the broad scope of the battle and directing it, and there were those who continued to clash with the undead with swords in their hands. Zika's role was to bridge the gap between the two, and to ensure that they worked together seamlessly. Although unassuming, without his work, the cohesiveness would have frayed and possibly even crumbled. Petra, I think even more so since my nay Samus and I were behind the scenes as part of the group of healers. Zika, that is much appreciated recognition, Miss Petra. Just receiving those words from a woman, I, Zika Osman, feel deeply rewarded. Petra, I am not saying that lightly. Zika, of course, understood. But I do mean it, too. Zika nodded his head as Petra tried to push back, feeling that she had been ignored. Then he turned his round eyes to the view of the city and relaxed his cheeks. Zika, if there is any reward to be had, this sight, this result, is it? His Excellency the Emperor fled to the east, and I happened to be in the fortress city on a mission. Thanks to this coincidence, I had the honor of accompanying His Excellency and being present at this moment. I am undeniably blessed. Petra, I am not sure. Zika-san, don't you deserve more praise? Zika, don't you get it? In that case, Miss Petra, can't you think of someone likable in that brilliant mind of yours? Petra gave an huh at the abrupt suggestion. In her mind, all she could vaguely recall was Natsuki Subaru, who had occupied a large part of her mind until a few minutes ago. Zika nodded deeply in response to Petra, who unintentionally did exactly as he said. Zika, that likable someone will smile at you as a result of your deeds. Isn't that enough to make you feel rewarded? Petra, that is. Well, yes, Zika, it's the same thing. I am a general of the Wallachian Empire, but the person Miss Petra has in mind is probably far greater than I, at least in my opinion. So, this is fine, so spoke Zika, with one eye closed and his hand clutched to his chest as he smiled at Petra. He was neither being unreasonable nor trying to deceive Petra when he said that. That was why Petra also quietly lowered her head and could not say anything. However, His Excellency Vincent is all for reward and punishment according to merit. I disapprove of a person who's done such meritorious service saying such selfless things, as it makes it difficult for the soldiers to express their opinions. Then, instead of Petra, who had closed her mouth, a voice interrupted from a different direction. Petra and Zika turned their heads to see Serena walking slowly toward them. Serena Drakroy, with a distinctive white scar on her cheek that nevertheless did not detract from her dignified beauty, was accompanied by her acquaintance Roswaal beside her, who made Petra's lips curl. Serena and the others did not miss that flagrant response from Petra. Serena, as usual, how can you be so disliked by someone who seems old enough to be your daughter? You cannot complain about being stabbed in the back by someone who so openly shows rebellious intent. Roswaal, I would never hire a child who can't think about the consequences of their actions. Regardless of your perception of me, I only employ competent people like Petra Kun, Otto Kun, and the like. Serena, that's a bad habit you have. Eventually, it's going to be the reason you get your feet swept out from under you. Serena shrugged her shoulders, having a casual exchange with Roswaal, her caustic words mercilessly critical of him, which Petra found somewhat enjoyable to listen to. But the truth was that she did not really feel that small pleasantness at the moment. Zika, High Countess Drakroy, I thought you were busy. Serena, the same could be said of you, General. Don't worry. Though it's true that I haven't slept for the past 3 days, my eyes are still clear. I can't sleep. Zika, that does not sound very reassuring. Serena smiled fearlessly at Zika, and Zika's shoulders contracted like he was afraid of her. Roswaal's gaze turned to Petra as those two exchanged a few words. Petra, who had consciously avoided contact with him, stiffened slightly at his gaze. Petra, what is it, Master? Roswaal, don't be so wary, I'm simply concerned that you're alone and that you're working too much. Where is Frederica? Petra, Frederica Nisama has been keeping herself very busy for a long time and is now taking a break. After many requests, she finally took a break. It reminded her that Frederica was barely breathing and sleeping as if in a coma. Frederica, like Petra, worked as one of the healers, but also went around the fortress as a messenger, transforming herself into a beast when necessary. Her tireless work ethic was something to be respected, but as her protégée, she could not help but feel worried. The fact that she was resting now was not because she listened to Petra's appeal, but because Ram and Garfield pushed her to do so. Petra, I couldn't even convince Frederica Nisama to rest. Roswaal, Frederica has a strong sense of responsibility. By no means did she mean any disrespect to you, Petra-kun. Petra, HK, I know that already, you don't have to tell me that. Roswaal, I see. You're right. I'm sorry I said something I shouldn't have. Are you okay? Petra, the yang magic is working properly. Petra furrowed her eyebrows and answered Roswaal's subtly dodging response. Petra's magical techniques, which she learned from Roswaal and was now developing day by day, were suited to the yang attribute, which had many effects that increased the power and vitality of the target. In Petra's case, she was still uneasy about using it on others, but she could use her yang magic on herself and be adequate enough to compensate for her lack of strength or lack of sleep. Of course, stamina is not an endless source of energy, so eventually, one's limits will emerge. Petra, right now, I would like to work a little bit more. Do you wish to stop me, Roswaal? No, I won't stop you. We all have opportunities in life when we have to overcome reason and common sense with passion and force, and if this is the time for you, Petra-kun, I'm not going to take that away from you. Petra, I still don't like you, Master. Petra turned her face away from Roswaal, who closed one eye and looked at her with his blue one. Despite being such an unforgivable person, Roswaal often affirmed Petra's ideas in this way. While he did not say these words to curry favor with Petra, it also didn't help that these were his honest opinions. For that being so, it would be as if Petra could understand Roswaal's true nature. Serena, what a troublesome master-servant relationship. The way such things are, the Empire and the Kingdom aren't so different. Don't you think so, General Second Class Zika? Zika, with Miss Petra being so intelligent at her age, it is not surprising that she is so enthusiastic about Margrave Mathes's education. When sincerity meets sincerity, I think a clash is inevitable. Of course, I think such a harsh way of life has also honed the beauty of High Countess Drakroy. Serena, good grief, you're an imperial general through and through. I thought you were a decent man, but instead, you're like this. You are pleasing me by showing me a face to my liking. While Petra and Roswaal talked, Zika reverently bowed to Serena's comments. Petra sighed as she watched the conversation between two of the Empire's most unique temperaments. Roswaal's nature, whatever it may be, was unimportant. Now that she was face to face with Roswaal, whom she has been avoiding, there was no stopping now, to which Petra tightened her cheeks and looked up at Roswaal. Petra, what are you planning to do with Subaru, Master? Roswaal, Petra, please answer. Petra's question was straightforward but lacking in specificity. Roswaal let out a small sigh as it was directed at him. He closed one eye again, and, this time, looked at Petra with the yellow one, this time with an inhuman look that Petra disliked. The unnaturalness of Subaru and Roswaal's relationship gave Petra a strong impression. Petra suspected that this was something different from the indiscretions of Roswaal in Arlam village, Petra's hometown, or the sanctuary where Frederica and Garfield were from, something that Subaru and the others had almost entirely tolerated. If we look at Roswaal's misdeeds and who pardoned him, the conditions were the same for Subaru, Emilia, and Frederica, who were too forgiving. Then there was Beatrice and Garfield, who said they were angry, followed by Ram, who was in a unique position, and Petra and Otto, who clearly did not forgive Roswaal. Naturally, Petra and Otto always felt tension when dealing with Roswaal. Of course, they did not want to make waves, so the tension was like quietly roasting over a flame. What she disliked about Roswaal was that he never changed his expression while being roasted in such a way. However, the blue flames that Petra and Otto directed toward Roswaal and the heat in the air between Subaru and Roswaal seemed fundamentally different. It was a terrible way of putting it, Petra did not want to admit it. But she was convinced. Between Subaru and Roswaal, there was a secret that neither Petra nor anyone else was included in. That shared secret was the source that gave rise to a different kind of tension. Furthermore, the consequences of that secret would surely, probably, cause Subaru misfortune. Roswaal, What I'm planning to do with Subaru, was it? At Petra's hostile look, Roswaal muttered in a slightly gravelly voice. She felt that there was not the usual atmosphere of deception and mockery housed within that. However, even without such a clownish atmosphere, she could not heedlessly trust Roswaal. As if to confirm Petra's sentiment, Roswaal, with one eye still closed, Roswaal, Petra-kun, what do you think would be the correct thing for me to do? Petra, are you making fun of me? Roswaal, no, I didn't mean it that way. Genuinely, I'm at a bit of a loss. What kind of stance should I take, in regards to Subaru-kun? Petra, as he said this, Roswaal lightly lifted both hands and lit his fingertips with lights of different color. Floating red on his right hand and blue on his left, he was earnestly considering his next move. Red and blue, whichever direction each led, Petra was unsure which would be the better path for her, nay, for the people that were important to her, as much as she was unsure, if there was anything Petra could do. It was just one thing. Petra, if, Roswaal, Petra, if you cause Subaru any further pain, if you cause him any further grief, I will never forgive you, master. No, I will absolutely make you regret it. Not forgiving him would not hurt Roswaal in any way. After serving him for 1.5 years already, she understood that. This was why, thinking back to the past 1.5 years as hard as she could, Petra said the one thing Roswaal would hate the most. Yes, she would make him regret it no matter what. For that reason, Petra, whatever it is you are wanting to do, whatever it is you are planning to do, master, I am going to get in the way of it by any means necessary. Roswaal, for a moment, a silence was born between Petra and Roswaal. Petra focused all her strength into tensing her cheeks, intending to make the sternest face she had ever made in the history of her adorable self. In response to Petra's direct approach, Roswaal fell silent. It was unclear to what extent Petra's stern face contributed to his contemplation in that moment of silence. Roswaal, that would certainly be troubling. You seem to be much more loved than I am. Petra, when you say that I am loved, by what exactly? Roswaal, something that I've resolved myself to resist, yet have never been able to prevail against, a peculiar power of that sort. Roswaal shrugged his shoulders and once again said something that Petra did not understand. But, what clouded his face as he muttered this made Petra think it was not mere nonsense. Indeed, Roswaal was dealing with a sense of powerlessness, something that was fully aware that he could not win. Even though she was being told that she was loved as such, it did not make much sense to Petra. Petra merely wanted to be loved by the people she loved. In addition, she would like for her loved ones to be as happy as possible with smiles on their faces. That was why, Petra, I want Emilia Nisama and Subaru to smile. Petra firmly clapped her hand on her chest and muttered those words as if she was praying. She sincerely hoped that all of these prayers would hang like clouds over those whom she loved, protecting them from the hardships that would otherwise come down on them like the rays of the sun. Beside Petra's and Roswaal's exchange, watching the master and servant swelling with a burning tension, Serena casted a smile at Zika. Serena, what do you think? Even the people of the kingdom show quite a bit of promise, now don't they? Quite complex and mysterious, just the way I like it. Zika, it is beautiful when you smile like that, High Countess, but I cannot say it is in good taste.